All right, I'm gonna talk about my Canada trip because I know I reference it a lot in my everyday conversation about race relations and race and world perspective, but I never actually have gone into a detailed view about it. I've talked about it on Facebook a couple of times, but I haven't actually went into the details of my Canada trip back in 2001. So this was a minute ago, but it really changed my perspective and outlook on life. So I'm gonna go into it and kind of give the details because I know I say a lot of things about race relations, and this is and when I say stuff, I know I lose black people, and it's because black people who haven't gone out of the country don't fully understand a lot of things. And after the Canada trip that I took, I got it. I finally understood the white perspective of race relations, and I also understood why, what was it, like Malcolm X when he went over to Mecca. I understood why he was, basically preaching "kill Whitey." Then he left America, came back, and was like, "Oh no, I was wrong." Like I understand it. And I personally think that's also why he got killed. But hey, that's another video. But anyway, so I'm gonna go into the details about my Canada trip because when I say some of the things, I want to know. I want people to know where I'm coming from. So I'm gonna start off with a little bit of history beforehand, so you kind of know the mentality that I had when I went there, and I was 14 years old. So this is another thing. So it wasn't like I was some really, really, really little kid. All right. So when I was a kid, and I referenced it before, my dad's a musician. So when I was a kid, my dad always had these stories of places he had gone and people he had met and et cetera and so forth. But he always came back to me personally and kind of just told me like life lessons about, people who you hang around, people who you don't hang around, why you don't hang around them. And, as a little kid, I just thought it was kind of fascinating. It was sort of like, all right, I'll kind of food for thought, whatever. I just want to go outside and play. But he told me some stuff that I've kind of always held on to. My dad has said a lot to me over the years, but there's some nuggets of information that always kept their they were ingrained in me, and they somehow just stuck there. And one of them was my dad always told me, son, travel a lot when you can, travel as often as you can and as much as you can. And I was kind of like, he said, see, like, so travel as often as you can, as much as and see as much of the world as you can, but you're not going to see it all in one lifetime because there's just too much to see. And he actually got that there's too much to see. He got that from his grandmother, who, she died back in the 70s. So, I never got to meet her since I was born in the mid 80s. But he said that. He said, travel a lot. And then when I got a little bit older, he's kind of repeating the same stuff. He was like, the world doesn't hate blacks. And I kind of didn't understand what he meant by that. Because I forgot how old I was when he said that. I think I was like 9, 8, maybe even 10. I'm not really positive. But he said, the world doesn't hate blacks. And he was like, I know the television may make it seem like that, but that's not actually the case. That's just here in the United States. And I'm like, all right, well, that's fine, but I live in the United States, so that doesn't really affect me. And then of course, I'm watching television as a kid and all sort of stuff as well. So my perspective of the world is, there's my country, the United States, and then there's other countries, but I definitely got the better deal by living in the United States. So I'm kind of like, well, that helps, but I don't live there. And or should I say, that doesn't really affect me. So that's just, that's advice I'll never use. But I'm like, okay, well, if I ever leave the country, which I have a feeling I would, that would be good advice to use. So okay, whatever. Then he used to tell me about his trips that he took to like the Caribbean and Mexico. And I say trips, it wasn't really trips, it was business, or it was his job. Because like he played cruise ships down in the Caribbean. He went to Mexico a few times. And he told me about one trip he went down into Mexico in the 80s. And I'm not sure what he was referring to because I haven't seen this. I haven't seen any stories on this era that he was talking about, but he said that back in the 80s there was a whole lot of volatility between the United States and Mexico. And, a lot of people were watching the news and they were scared to go to Mexico. And, because like there was like drug lords and women were going missing and people were getting robbed. People would go down there trying to go to, just some tourist attraction, and they would come back with nothing, and they barely got back across the U.S. border, and all these horror stories. And again, I think this is early '80s. I'm not really positive. Maybe somebody older than me can verify or whatever, or give more details. But he said that there was all these people missing, so he was kind of scared to go down there. Sort of like like I'm not sure if I want to go down there with all this violence going on, but he actually went down there and saw that he was left alone, and because he said he was hesitant to say that he was an American because that's who they were, robbing, raping, and pillaging, more or less. And he was like, yeah, I'll just, I don't know how I'm gonna react, But then he said he got down there and he's like, all these Mexicans started coming up to him speaking Spanish. He was kind of like, I'm not Mexican, and they'd be like, oh, we're sorry, you look Mexican. He's like, what do you mean do I look Mexican? Because, he had the same view of Mexicans as we do in America. Like you're dark hair, but light skinned, maybe tan skinned, Hispanic person who, I'm gonna use like a historian's perspective. The people who are the offspring of the conquest of the native Mexicans versus the Spanish Inquisition people, whoever. I'm not really sure who the specific bodies were, but basically you're light-skinned Mexicans. Well, my dad's light-skinned, but he's not like light-skinned. He's not like he doesn't, he wouldn't pass for white like anywhere. I mean, he has enough black features to where you're just like, oh, he's actually, he's not light skinned. He's probably more fair complexion. He's a fair complected person, but he's clearly black. There's no discrepancy. So when he went to Mexico and he's like wondering why these Mexicans are speaking Spanish to him, he started like really looking around and looking at the real Mexico, not the resort vacation spot Mexico where a lot of whites hang out. But he started looking around. He's like, oh, the reason why they're speaking Spanish to me is because I look like a Mexican. Like, Mexicans down there literally go from, can probably pass as white all the way up to, dark like an African. Well, we don't see the dark like an Africans up here in the United States, or at least they're not promoted. So people don't assume that, they're Mexicans. Well, down there, that's common knowledge. So that's why they spoke to them. Anyway, not to get too far off on that. But when he said he was down there, they were speaking Spanish to him and they were treating him as equal. And he's like, I'm an American. Like, I thought you guys hated Americans. And he's like, oh, well, we do. And he's like, oh, well, he's like, yeah, well, sorry, we didn't know you were American, but, you're pretty cool, so whatever. Well, as he was kind of in that culture, he said that, the rest of the world views America as white. Like, if you're a black American, the rest of the world doesn't really care. If you're a Hispanic American, the rest of the world doesn't care. If you're an Asian American, the rest of the world doesn't care. But if you're a white American, oh, well, they got a problem. So I was kind of like, oh, wow, that's interesting. He's like, yeah, he said it blew his mind. So when he kind of realized that, he kind of relaxed a little bit, and some of the stuff that he heard going on down there in Mexico that made the news, he kind of saw remnants of it around, and yeah, it was pretty much just around, just on the outskirts of resorts and travel locations is where most of this is happening. And yeah, they were singling out white people because they knew they're for sure Americans. So, and there's whites in Mexico too, but there's a clear difference between the two. But as with any place. So I remembered that story for years to come. And always just held on to it. So going more into the story, my mom said that we were going to go with Dad because he had to do some. He was on tour, and he had to do some shows in Vancouver, Canada, and Seattle, Washington. 'Cause. 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 they were going to be gone for 2 weeks. Now, I didn't want to go at first because the week that we were going to be in, was I in? Yeah, Seattle. I think, yeah, Seattle was the first place we were at. I'm pretty sure it was Seattle. I can't remember if I was in Seattle for, either way, I was gone for 2 weeks. 1 week was in Seattle, 1 week was in Vancouver. I'm pretty sure I was in Vancouver first. I think we went to Seattle, spent a couple of days, went across, spent a week, and then came back. Yeah, well, anyway, let's just say I was in Vancouver first. So, Mom says we're going to Seattle and Vancouver, and I didn't want to go at first because the second week I was going to be there, I was going to miss my first. I was gonna miss my first day of school because the day we came back was the first day of school, and I was going into high school. So of course I wanted to be there, see my friends, check out all the chicks, do my thing. Because every 14-year-old is cool. So, but nonetheless, I'm like, well, I'm probably not gonna be able to go to Canada again. I've never been out of the country. Truly, I mean, I've been to Canada a couple of times, but it was like hop across the border, spend like 3 hours, and come across the back. I think it was like not Montreal. The areas of Canada that are by Detroit. That's the only places I'd ever gone. So I was like, well, I get to go way out in Canada, and Vancouver is about 20 miles off of the U.S.-Canadian border. So I was like, well, I won't be like deep into Canada, but then that's also when I found out that 85 or 80% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border. So I'm like, oh well, there you go. So I'll get Canadian culture if it's even much different. And they always say that Canada's just like the United States minus a couple things. Well, okay. So I was like, whatever. Well, anyway, so we go to Canada, and at first it's just like the U.S. The only thing I noticed different off the bat is the metric system. Up there the distance is kilometers. So of course I noticed that stuff would be like please do not exceed 55 miles an hour. And then you go across the U.S. border, and the first sign you see it is please do not exceed 60 kilometers per mile or per hour or whatever they have up there. And I'm just like, oh well, I hope Dad knows how to read that because don't want to get pulled over for speeding when you don't know you're speeding. But then that was when I noticed that they do put kilometers per hour on the cars underneath the miles per hour. So that was a nice little tidbit of information. But when we got inside Vancouver and we drove through like all the streets and stuff to get there. I mean, Vancouver, Canada, like downtown looks just like downtown. I mean, I would say more high buildings, but it's just like downtown Indianapolis or downtown Louisville or Chicago. If you take away the really tall buildings, maybe cut some of the buildings in half, and that I mean, it's an urban city just like any urban city in the United States. So I was kind of like, oh, okay, this is what they mean by it's just like the United States, which most first world countries, I didn't know at the time, most first world countries, the cities all look the same. It's just the people walking around them. And the people walking around downtown Vancouver, they looked like Americans. They dressed like Americans. I did notice the Canadian accent. Like, hey, how's it going? It's like you hear that every now and then. It's not as bad as we kind of Americans give them crap for, but it's there. It's prevalent. You know who's Canadian and who isn't. Like you can kind of tell who's moved to Canada and who's lived there all their lives. You can kind of tell some of that stuff, but for the most part, it's just like the United States. Well, anyway, Dad wanted me to. I think a night or two passed. No, I think it was that first night we were there. It got kind of late, and Mom wanted to go to bed, and Dad was like, I'm gonna go walk around the city. So he's like, okay. And then he's like, John, do you want to go with me? And I'm like, it's 11:30. I think this was the second night. Yeah, because we had walked around during the day and stuff. It wasn't really much of anything, but so I was like, yeah, Dad, I'll go. Sure, whatever. Me and Dad, guy time, hang out with my dad is cool. My twin brothers were born. They were born, but they were real like we went in. That was before 9/11. So I guess July. We went in July of '01. That's when we were there. In July, August of '01, and so my brothers are like just a couple months old. Like they can't even hold their head up really. Well, they can hold their head up, but they definitely could not crawl. So anyway, so Mom had the twins. She was tired with them. She went to bed. Me and Dad went walking downtown. And we were walking downtown. I was like, okay, this is cool. People were out. I think it was a weekend. I think we went walking on like a Saturday night or something. and it was pretty cool. You know, a lot of teenagers, that was the first thing I noticed. There's a lot of teenagers out for it to be 11, because I know here I don't know about the rest of the United States, but here around Indy, you know, it's like I think like 11 o'clock is curfew hour for teenagers, and there were like a lot of teenagers walking around, but there were a lot of like young adults and mid adults. When I say young adults, I want to say like mid 20s, and adults like up to mid 30s, just walking around, and no one was like asking like, wow, why are all these teenagers out? You know, it's just like, oh yeah, you know, okay, the teenagers are out. It's Saturday night, of course they're going to be out, you know. And of course a lot of the shops and stuff were closed or closing, because you know it's the weekend, everything's open later. But nobody was shocked that there were a bunch of teenagers out at that time of night and in such quantity. And that's one thing I noticed. I was kind of like, there's a lot of young people out. He's like, oh yeah, the rules are kind of different up here. There's like, you know, there's stuff going on for teens to do. And I was like, oh really? He's like, yeah. And then I noticed after he said that, we walked we walked a little bit further, and we passed this place, and I noticed that there was a lot of noise coming out of it. So I walked up to it, and it said, "Do not enter after," or it said, "No one under the age of 14 after like, you know, midnight or 1 a.m. or something like that." And I'm like, "What?" Like, first off, what do you mean no one under 14? Like, who's going to be out under 14 at 1 o'clock in the morning? And then even then, why are 14-year-olds out at 1 o'clock in the morning? You know? And I'm like, dang, I'm out with my dad. And I'm thinking, you know, okay, I'm only good because I got my dad. And then I'm like, okay. And the place was an arcade. You know, this was back when, you know, this was like the last vestiges of arcade. You know, in the United States, the arcades are pretty much dead. You know, this is like, you know, Xbox has just come, like the original Xbox has just come out, PlayStation 2's out. You know, this is that era. So, but I'm like, you know, an arcade at 1 in the morning, like under 14? I'm like, what? So I looked at my dad, and he's like, oh yeah, that's you know, only you know, the United States is the one who has like, you know, stuff not for teenagers and stuff like that. It's like other places have it. Or, and it depends where you go in the United States. I'm like say earlier, because I have seen places for teenagers at bigger cities. But I say bigger cities, big cities like, you know, Chicago, New York. Haven't been to LA since I was really, really young, but I'm pretty sure they probably got some stuff there too. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, so Dad was like, yeah, you know, they got a lot of stuff for teenagers. Like, that's why you don't see that's why they have a lower teenage crime rate than in the United States, because they got stuff for teens to do, you know, late at night on the weekend. And I'm like, oh well, why didn't the United States have that? And he literally looked at me and went, I don't know, more problems with our country that can be easily solved that they never want to solve. And I go, oh, okay, so whatever. Well, we kept walking. And I'm a tangent real quick and just say that after this event, I'm not going to go into too much of a detail of it, but I got to get my dad respect. I actually saw my first wide open, or should I say, I won't say wide open, my first multi-person drug deal go down, okay? And my dad called it to a T. And what it was a guys who were all standing around, and my dad's like, hey, look around. He's like, there's a drug deal that's about to happen. And like, if you're just a lay person and you don't know how drug deals on multi-person levels work, you would not have noticed this at all. Not have noticed this. I got my dad props on this one. My dad always talks about, well, that's another thing. My dad always talks about the hood and all the stuff he saw when he grew up. And to a while, it sounds cool. And then after a while, it's just like, yeah, okay, Dad, we know. Ghetto life, thug life, school of hard knocks, we know. But when he saw this, or when he called this, I had a whole new respect for my dad. So he's like, all right. Anyway, so we're walking. He goes, there's a drug deal about to go down. He's like, I need to figure out where the lookouts are, where the distractions are, and where the cops are. And I'm like, okay, Dad, whatever. And he goes, all right, see that guy standing over there in the corner on the, because there's like this guy kind of off between like the alley and the main road where we were walking. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, see that guy smoking a cigarette? He's the lookout. I'm like, okay. Then he's like, now I need to find out who the drug dealers are and who the distraction is. And I'm like, okay. He's like, well, all right, the cops are down there, so the distraction has to be somewhere over there. And I'm like, okay. And like, and all while just like we're kind of walking a little bit slower. My dad's panning left and right, just left and right, left and right. And I'm like, I'm like, all right, Dad's freaking out over nothing again, whatever. Out of nowhere, this kid takes off on a bike. One of the police that's kind of like in the area goes, hey, get back here. And he like, the officer goes after him, but the kid on the bike, he didn't take off. He kind of just sort of took off. And of course, the cop caught him, and he grabbed him by the backpack and didn't really pull him off the bike, but pulled him to the point where he couldn't pedal anymore because the kid's foot slipped off the pedal. And he's like, "Hey, come here!" And like 2 or 3 other officers ran over and tried to get his friends, who tried to intervene somewhat. And Dad goes, "There it is, right there. That's the distraction." And then I'm like, "Okay, but where's the drug deal? And why would it be out here in the middle of the street?" He's like, "Just wait for it. Come on, let's go." So we walked. We walked probably, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 steps. There's this guy, I'll never forget, white dude, had black hair, dark rim glasses, and he had another guy walking with him with a backpack, and he had a bag in his hand. And the guy who was wearing the glasses was going up to like every person going, "Weed, weed, 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 weed." And he looks right at me in the face and goes, "Weed?" And then my dad goes, "No, we're good." He goes, "Yeah." And he just kept walking, goes, "Weed, weed." And we turn and walk away. I'm like, "Heck no." I'm like, "What?" And then the direction we were walking, we were approaching the guy who my dad said was the lookout. And by the time I looked up to see him, he had already gone and like walked off. I'm like, "Oh my goodness." I'm like, my dad did not just sit here and call it a drug deal. I mean, at 14 years old, we had like rap music and all that stuff. I was talking about like all the gangster life and this, that, and the third. And it's just like, okay, well, whatever. But to see my dad do that, I was always like, is my dad a low-key thug? Like is he one of the thugs who got out? Like, this don't make no sense right now. But that was just cool. But anyway, back to my main story, but the main point. So the next day, after I hung out with my dad that night and saw the drug deal go down, saw the places open late for teenagers. This is also the first place where I saw underage prostitution too, but I ain't gonna go with that. That's a dark story, but I'll tell that some other time. But actually, no, I'll probably follow that up with my actual story. But anyway, so the next day we're hanging out with Dad and some of the other band members. We all go out to lunch, and when we go to lunch, I noticed. Because we went to lunch around, I would say, it was like real lunch hour, like, noon, maybe 12:15, something like that. And we're walking down this place, and, like I said, downtown Vancouver, just like any other city. But I started noticing, like people's mannerisms are different in Canada, Like, people are a lot friendlier, considering the size of the city and where we were at. And that struck me like right off the bat, because like in America, when you have that many people in one area, everyone kind of has like a "don't bother me, don't touch me, get away from me" kind of attitude. Well, Canadians are just like, I'm out in public, obviously I'm going to deal with other people, so whatever. And there's a toned down hostility. Now, true enough, this is before 9/11, blah blah blah. So there's that as well. But they were way more relaxed than Americans were. So that was something that I noticed. And then I started noticing like the interracial couples were there. And I don't mean interracial just like, black dude, white chick. I mean, this was black guy, white girl, white guy, Polynesian woman, Asian dude with a black woman. I mean, it's just like there's these weird mixes of couples. And I'm like, whoa, like, that's strange. 'Cause, like, in America, it's always like, oh, multicultural, interracial just means blacks and whites getting along. That's all it means. It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. Just a black man usually is with a white woman, and that's an interracial couple, which it is. But that's just typically what everybody thinks and leaves it at that. They don't think of, a Japanese man with a Hispanic woman. Like no one goes there when you say interracial couple. So, or no one thinks that when you think of an interracial couple. So that was like weird mixes like that or stuff that I was seeing. Now, it wasn't huge. It wasn't like, oh my God, it's everywhere. It was just like the fact that I even saw it was like stunning. But when we got close to the restaurant, I noticed like we were walking and I saw this old couple. And I mean old. They weren't that old. I'd probably say at the time they were probably late 60s, early 70s. And it was a black dude, white woman. And they were walking the same direction we were. And I saw a black couple, black man, black woman, walking the opposite way. So, we're going one direction, the black couple's coming the other direction. And this is still in the era of black women being royally pissed off when they see a black man with a white woman. So I'm like, here it comes. And the black couple looked at the interracial couple, said, "Hi, how are you doing?" Smiled, and they both just went about their way. And I was like, that did not just happen. I mean, I was waiting for the black woman to turn around and be like, that nigga over there with that white girl. And nope, she just kept walking like it was any other day of the week. And I'm like, what? And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not in the United States. Oh, wait a minute. That's right. Like Dad said, black people aren't hated in Canada. But then I thought, no, that's just me. Okay, there's the one black couple in Canada who doesn't care about interracial relationships because, they're not in interracial relationships, so they're fine, whatever. I'm just keep it moving. So we go into the restaurant, and, it's just normal restaurant, sit down, eat. Like it was a hole in the wall kind of place. But still, it was popular amongst the area because they had a large seating arrangement. I mean, it was kind of like larger than what you would think of when you went to no, I'll probably say the seating would be like if you went to Applebee's or something. It was like that seating, but it wasn't a chain restaurant. So we're sitting there, we're eating, Dad, a couple of band members, Dad, and then we're talking about the tour and what, and how they, how proud they are to all be in this band, and where all they different came from, and their, the war wounds that they got to get to where they are. And while they're, talking and going back and forth, I see another interracial couple, and this one was, what was it? I don't think it was another black man. No. It was. I'm sorry. I'm thinking there's three couples I saw. This one was a black man, white woman, but they were young. And by young, I mean, I'd give them 25, maybe 24. They were young. Like, they were clearly fresh out of college. Or maybe just a couple years removed. But they were young. And same thing happened, but different couple. Like, there's interracial couple, they were the interracial couple, and they were walking through, and an old white couple was walking in their path, and I thought, oh, okay, because they were of the generation where it's whites come in through this entrance, coloreds go in through the other entrance era. Like, they're that old. So I'm thinking, oh, here it comes. Like, okay, the black couple let me down. Now the white couple, they're for sure gonna deliver the racism that I'm looking for, the low key racism that I'm looking for. And they walked by that white couple, and that white couple looked at them and smiled. And the white woman grabbed her white man and gave him, like, she said something to him, but her eyes said, "Honey, don't you remember when that was us?" And I was like, oh my goodness, are you serious? I'm like, oh, I am not in the United States. And then I thought this is not real. This is not real. And that was the only time I saw it. And I did see another couple as well that didn't get glares, but they were one of those odd mixes. It was like Asian man with white woman, or Asian man with Polynesian woman. Like one of those kind of, they're interracial, but it's one of those things of like, just in America we don't really care, because it's two races of people who we don't care about, or we don't exploit. No. But seriously, I saw them, and they kind of get the same reaction. But I'm like, all right, maybe they don't care about that just like the America doesn't care about it. So, because I will say there is a lot of American-ish media in Canada, or American-style media in Canada. So I figured, okay, well, they're not listening to the same media we are, so that's probably why they don't care about it anyway. So we had lunch, we moved on, and I wanted to go. Like, Dad wanted to get something, and I don't remember what it was. So we went to a Walgreens. But before we went to the Walgreens, he wanted to get something else. I don't remember where he went, but he's like, "Hey, John, you want to go in there and get something for me from Walgreens?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And he's like, "Yeah, you can get yourself something to drink too if you want." So I'm like, "All right." And I think he gave me like, I don't know, $10, $15, something like that. And he sent me into Walgreens, and I walked into Walgreens, and there's this white lady behind the register. She was young. Again, I'll give her 25-ish, 24, working behind the register. She goes, "Hi, welcome to Walgreens." I'm like, "Hey." and she was doing something with like the register or behind the register. Like I remember, she had a bunch of papers in her hand, a little bit larger than a receipt, but not like full sheets of paper. So she was like she was counting something. It looked like she was counting something. But she looked up briefly, said hi, smiled, like, welcome. Then she went back to what she was doing. Now, this was significant to me because not only had I seen interracial couples, but in America, you are not treated like that. In America, and I'm explaining this for white people, black people know what I'm talking about. But for white people, in America, as a black man, when you walk into something like that, what you get is, hi, how are you? Welcome to Walgreens, or hi. You get the normal greeting, but it's sort of that uneasiness. And again, I am speaking 2001, so this is before Obama and Bush had just got elected and all this other stuff. So there's certain things that you have to remember really at this point, since it's been 15 years, are time relevant. And at this situation, how it would have went down was, hi, welcome to Walgreens. And she would have looked down as to what she was doing, but she would have paused and then tried to look up at me through the top of her eyes without trying to make it look like she was staring me down. Sort of like is he going to come in here and rob me? Is he going to try to shoplift? Is he going to come in here and do something? Like there's sort of that just awareness of your surroundings kind of attitude, kind of like like you see an animal looking at you, but you look at it not to mess with it, but just to make sure it doesn't attack you or it doesn't approach you or something. Like that's the way that whites and blacks interact. And of course we all say that it's not racist or anything, but it is. But anyway, she didn't do that. She went right back to what she was doing. So I was like, all right, I'm about to be slick. I'm about to catch this chick up. So I walk a little bit and I turn around real fast, and she's still messing with her. She's still messing with her papers. And then she's like just going off for work. So I'm thinking, oh, okay. Like so then I start doing stuff that that as a black person you're told not to do by your elders. Like, don't go into a store with your hands in your pockets. Don't go into a store touching everything. Don't go into a store without no money, touching everything and got your hands in your pockets. Like I'm doing all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, come on, like look at me, get weird, do something. Well, she never did that. So I got my drink and I forgot, I got something else that Dad wanted. No, I take that back. Before that, because I forgot, Dad came in with me, or he met me in there. But anyway, so as I'm shopping, I leave her vision for a minute, and then there's this white lady in the aisle. She's shopping in the same aisle that I am, and usually white women, especially when you see a black teenager, white women get a certain type of way. Meaning, like they'll either grab their purse and step back and kind of close off, or they'll do something that kind of like it comes off to black people as don't touch me, but there's like this uneasiness with it that I'm not really sure what goes through white people's brains, especially white women's brains when they do it. Again, this is era specific. This is 2001, so this is before Obama. This is before everything's racist. This is before, so this is before all that. So keep that in mind when I'm describing this stuff, because I don't want people to lose sight of the era that I'm talking about. So she did this weird kind of, like, or should I say, white girls do like this weird kind of, defensive Heisman, low-key Heisman kind of move. It's kind of like, okay, well, whatever. Well, as black people, we get used to that, and it's just like, well, all right, another racist white person. Well, this lady didn't do that. I mean, she did this like I was just somebody in the store, and I'm just kind of like, all right, we got interracial couples, we got overly nice cashiers, and now we got shoppers who treat me like I'm just somebody else. So I go, oh, excuse me, and she's like, yep, go ahead. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever. So but it stayed in my mind. So then I thought for sure, okay, she's not going to come any closer to me. She's just going to let me pass and go on about her business. Well, then she, like, as she was looking for something in the same area I was, like, she kind of like walked up next to me. Now this wasn't like a girl who was my age. This one was like, late 30s hitting 40s. So she had I think she was like she carried herself like she was married, really. So I'm like, okay. So I mean, this wasn't like one of those, oh, she was hitting on you, John. No, that for sure wasn't it. But or she wanted to be close to you or something like that. No, this for sure wasn't it. She was clearly on a mission. So, but she got what she wanted, and I would say part ways. I got what I was looking for, and I left, and I went to go get something to drink. So at that moment, I run into my dad, and we walk up there, he asked me, did I find it and blah, 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 and whatever. And I kind of told him, I'm like, like, it's different here. And then he's like, he kind of smiled, sort of like I know what you're talking about, but I want to make sure that what you're saying is what I think that you're saying. So I'm like, yeah, like people treat me different here. And he's like, yeah, I told you. He's like, you're not in the United States anymore. He's like, all that racist stuff that we're used to dealing with is gone, or like it's not up here, or at least if it is, it's from the visiting Americans. But America, we're trained to stay in the United States because we think that it's the greatest country on earth, and we have a lot of great things. Do not get me wrong about that, and I stick by that tried and true. But to sit here and act like that we're this utopia that we advertise ourselves as, that's not quite true. But at least it ain't for my generation. I'll tell you that much. But anyway, he's like, none of that mess and crap that goes on in the United States is really up here the way it is down there. So he's like, I'm sure if we stayed here long enough, we could find a Canadian racist, but we'd be here for decades or years before we even found that out. So we walked back up to the cashier, and she's like, hi, you guys find everything okay? She's like, yeah, we're fine. And she was like, nice day we're having, and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, where are you guys from? So I'm like, oh, she clearly knows that we're not from Canada. And then my dad's like, we're from the United States. I'm here on, he said here on business or work, or we're just visiting or something like that. She's like, oh, okay, well, hope you guys enjoy Canada. Bye. And we walked out, and I tried to turn around to catch her, sort of like that, looking at us. But she helped or she went back to whatever she was doing before we walked up, because she was doing, like, she wasn't done doing what it was that she was doing when I walked in. And how far am I into this? 36 minutes. Yeah, I'm almost done. Bear with me. So she was finishing up whatever it is that she was doing, and as we were going up to her in the cashier, somebody else was walking up too, but we let them go first. So she took care of them, took care of us, and then there was someone coming up behind, but she tried to get something else done before they walked up. So she took care of them, and then we walked out, and I went, wow, it's relaxed here. And Dad's like, yeah, this is what not being, the oppressed race is like, like, then, he went to tell me that, like, but their beef up in Canada is apparently there's this, whites versus Native Americans that goes on, in some of the outer places. And he's like, yeah, it's worse than America in the 1940s and 50s. So, and I was like, oh, well, that sucks. But, I was like, okay. And from that moment on, I just really was taken back at the fact that, of how I was treated by everybody. It's like I had this moment of relaxation where I realized it's like, up here, like, hate to say it, I'm not a nigger. It's just like, I am an average person. I am your average, well-to-do person who just walks around and does what everyone else does. And I can, I can date who I want up here. I don't have to be scolded and, why are you with that person? Why do you think she looks good? Why do you people do that? And, what's wrong with, it's like, and I'm not racist, but, it's like none of that applies up here. None of it. And from that day forward, I looked around and I was like, oh man, do I want to move up here? But then I realized I was in Canada and I hate the cold, so winter would suck. So, but, yeah, that's pretty much my Canada experience as far as, kind of just different cultural discrepancies and, or should I say different cultural norms and different styles of behavior and just like how they view the world. And that's when it came back to me, like Dad said, it's like, all of that stuff that we taught you about race, relations, and how to carry yourself does not apply here. And it was weird because it's like, it's like being in prison. Well, should I say, I haven't been to prison, so I really can't say that. It would be like how I would imagine prison to be, and then you come back out into the world, but you've been locked up for like 10 or 15 years. So you've already developed jail habits. And then now you got to come back out here in the world. And even though you're released back out into the world that looks like how you left it, like, the clothing style is different, the hair is different, the cars are different, the slang is different, like the attitude of people is different because of whatever reason. That's how I could probably imagine it to be when I was up in Canada. But it was still like, like I could relax. And and then I started noticing like I would do like white things, like what we would view here in America as white things, like black people. Like it's customary for us to see like when you hear police sirens, what do? You look out the window or you view from afar. But what do white people do? White people walk outside and they walk right up to the officer and ask what's going on. It's like black people. It's like I'm not going over there. I might get arrested too. It's just like but in Canada, you would hear police sirens. I mean, they got crime too. Like they're human, and I would be like, I ain't going over there. But I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not in America. I'm white here, more or less, like not the oppressed race. To me that was white. So I was just like, I'm gonna go ask this officer what's going on. And I would walk up just like everybody else and look, and I'm like, I don't feel like I'm going to get billy clubbed by simply looking, upon this scene from across the street like I do in America. So I started doing stuff like that, and it was like I would walk up to people and ask them questions, and they would smile at me and answer or confirm or deny, and go about their day. And I'm like, this is how life should be for everyone, and I'm just like, hell yeah, and when we came back to Seattle, I had a good time in Seattle. I'm not going to dog Seattle, but Seattle's in America. And I was quickly reminded that you are not in Canada anymore when I got back to Seattle. I'll tell you what. And it's not that Seattle was racist. Seattle had nice people. But Seattle's also a tourist city, too. Well, it's kind of a tourist city. So there were a lot of people who I could tell were from Canada, too, just by like the stuff they would say and the way they carry themselves. And I say it was the summer, so there was a lot of people who were clearly on vacation, in that, and like in a different part of the city. But it was like a black teenagers walking around. People would move out of your way when you're 15 feet away from you. People would, kind of like look at you weird, and it's just like, oh yeah, like all of those little isms that blacks are taught to obsess about here in America. All of that came flooding right back, and I went, oh, that's right. I am back in jail, more or less. To go back to my other analogy, I'm back in the system. It's like my racial freedom vacation has now come to an end. I am no longer your average person. I am now back to nigga. So it's like, well, whatever. But like I said, it's been 14 years now. And I still I've recited this to you back from memory, and it's one of those things of like, I don't know if I were to go there now if it'd be the same. I doubt it, but well, it probably would be. But it's probably a big difference since I'm I'm a grown man now, not a teenager. But yeah. So when I talk about my trip to Canada, these are all the things that that's the outlook that I have. And I'm not going to tell the story about the underage prostitution I saw, just because that's dark enough, So, and for me, since it's relations, this is dark enough. So I'm not going to go into underage prostitution, but I would just say that's messed up and disgusting, and I don't know who would even participate in that. And when guys sit here and say that, oh, I don't know, I didn't know how old she was, they're lying. So that's why when I hear some of these cases that come up, it's just like, I didn't know how old she was, Your Honor. It's like, yeah, you did, So it's like, but that's neither here nor there. But that's my trip to Canada. So when I sit here and say like, oh, my trip to Canada wasn't like that, those are the instances that I'm talking about and comparing it to. So that's my Canada trip. So whenever I reference Canada, that's what I'm talking about. All right, have a good day.